Our story begins September 2nd, 1966, at the Orange Bowl, the first ever game for the Miami Dolphins. The opening kickoff against the Oakland Raiders falls in the hands of a running back from Georgia Tech named Joe Auer III. With this 95-yard kickoff return, Auer will become the Dolphins' first leading scorer and its first MVP. Auer wasn't part of the Dolphins' undefeated team in 1972. He retired 3 years earlier after he was traded to the Atlanta Falcons. Nor was he the first person from the world of professional football, never mind the Miami Dolphins, to become involved in NASCAR. But having experienced such immediate success with a brand new team once before in his life, he was soon presented the opportunity to do it all over again. As if by divine retribution, they returned from the brink of extinction in even greater numbers. They aroused anger in some, admiration in others, but each knew 2004 was their chance to rise. They were the Field Fillers! Besides his career in football, Joe Auer was a car enthusiast. Back in the 1950s, as a student at Coral Gables High School, he was part of a team that raced a 1937 Ford, financed by a friend's father. On Fridays and Saturdays, when he wasn't playing football, Auer and the team would compete at the Hialeah Speedway and the Medley Speedway. According to an interview with Auer in 2003, their competitors included some very big names. Back in those days, we raced against Bobby and Donnie Allison and Red Farmer, who went on to make names for themselves in big-time racing, he said. Auer was later credited with building the late model that won the 1984 track championship at New Smyrna. Auer was also a businessman and founded two very different companies. The first in 1975 was International Computer Negotiations, or ICN, which held a series of seminars to teach effective negotiating tactics. These 2 to 3 day seminars were geared toward employees of large companies, that is, companies that could afford the non-negotiable sum of nearly $2,000 per person to attend. The other business was Race Car Engineering, which built race cars out of a shop in Winter Park, Florida. The race car engineering wasn't profitable, so Auer turned the company's attention to selling high-performance parts from their 330-page catalog. This turned things around almost immediately, so in May of 2001, he promoted the company's co-founder, Barry Haefele. At the time, Haefele had himself been involved in racing for over 3 decades, serving as a mechanic, fabricator, and driver. He was now Race Car Engineering's parts manager. "I've been fortunate over the years to have been associated with some of the best people in short track racing," said Haefele. "I am excited about this new opportunity. I really look forward to working with Leroy Porter and the rest of the Race Car Engineering parts team." The moment that brought both Auer and Haefele into NASCAR came sometime in 2003, when Haefele received a phone call from Mike Garvey. That year, Garvey was one of the most successful drivers in the American Speed Association. The driver fans called Garv led the most laps on the season and won the most races, including 3 in a 4-race span. He did all this with a small team out of Atlanta, where his family helped prepare the cars, his wife served as spotter, and Garvey himself picked up the phone at the shop. And though he'd ranked just 5th in points in 2003, Garvey still won a close contest for most popular driver, beating Reed Sorensen. It was Garvey's second time winning such an award, having also earned it in the Hooters Pro Cup Series in 1996. This was far from Garvey's only brush with drivers who would soon compete in the NASCAR Cup Series. In 1997, when he signed with WJP Motorsports, he replaced Matt Kenseth, who just that year made his jump to the NASCAR Busch Series, and now in 2003 was on his way to hoisting the Winston Cup. Before he moved from Muskegon, Michigan to Atlanta, Garvey had also competed at both Thunderbird Raceway in Berlin against the likes of Johnny Benson Jr. and Jack Sprague. "We all raced at Thunderbird at the same time, and we fanned out after that," said Garvey. "The thing is, Berlin Raceway is one of the trickiest tracks there is. It teaches you to drive through the corners, not just down the straightaways. If you can master that place, and I can't say that I have yet, you're in good company." Yet while Kenseth, Benson, and Sprague would go on to have success in NASCAR, Garvey had yet to find his footing there. As of 2003, Garvey had made just 20 combined starts in Busch and Truck Series competition. 12 of those came in Busch during the 1994 season, driving for team owner Ned Loire. During that stretch, Garvey finished no better than 14th and struggled with limited sponsorship before the team shut down. By 2003, Garvey hadn't competed in a single NASCAR race for 4 years. Now 40 and with 2 children, he was already fending off questions about his retirement. He said he had unfinished business in NASCAR, but to do this, he'd have to create his own opportunity. This is why Garvey called Haefele, telling them about a Busch Series car that Joe Nemechek was selling out of the Nemco Motorsports shop. He asked if Haefele and Auer were interested in buying the car and starting a team. We looked at it, and it really was a nice car, so we decided to go ahead and buy it, Auer said of the Monte Carlo. I also wanted to move up to NASCAR. The trio brought the car to Race Car Engineering's shop at Winter Park to start NASCAR's newest team, with Auer as the listed owner, Haefele as co-owner, and Garvey as driver. Also helping was Auer's son Joe Auer IV, a competitive swimmer whose wife Bess was a retired cheerleading coach and published author. Together, they called the team Competitive Edge Motorsports. Competitive Edge's first car needed a number. In ASA, Garvey had run the number 17, a remnant of his inherited ride from Kenseth. I don't think I can talk Matt Kenseth out of it, he said. Then he thought about the number 32, the number Auer carried as a Dolphin during his famous touchdown in 1966. That would be neat if we could do that for Joe, he said. It was, so they leased the number 32 from NASCAR. The 32 team's first crew chief was Shane Tesh, who served as Garvey's crew chief in ASA since 1999 and would work with him again in NASCAR. Mike is one of the best hands-on drivers I have ever had the privilege to work with, said Tesh in 2004. He can take a bad car and get a good finish out of it. If it's possible, he'll get it there. He has a good seat-of-the-pants feel, and within 10 laps, he can tell you what to do to the car. As a crew chief, you need direction, and that's what he will give you. Competitive Edge's first attempt came at Phoenix in November, their arrival overshadowed by an intense championship battle. That weekend, Garvey brought with him additional backing from Janiking, his sponsor in ASA. Any backing at all was helpful. They faced a stiff challenge as one of 52 drivers entered to make the 43-car field, and with no way of locking themselves into the field if the car was too slow. But Garvey stepped up, qualifying the car 17th on the grid in their first ever attempt. And in Garvey's first Busch start since 1999, the team finished the race under power, just 1 lap down in 26th. Garvey was pleased his car handled similar to his ASA car, despite increased horsepower and weight. He was excited about the team's potential. I've been impressed with the way Joe and his partners have started this team, said Garvey around this time. There is a strong commitment to fielding a future championship team, and there is a commitment to getting results for sponsors and partners. I don't know what the NASCAR equivalent would be of returning the opening kickoff for a touchdown, but I would definitely like to do for Joe what he did for the Dolphins. Competitive Edge had planned to attempt the season finale at Homestead, Auer's home track, to prepare for their first full-time season in 2004, but the team never entered that race and would be absent for the first part of 04. It wasn't until March 30th, when the team completed a 2-day test at Nashville, that news broke the team would return to action in the Busch race there in April. One of Garvey's proudest accomplishments was as a 2-time winner of the All-American 400 in 1993 and 2000, but that was on the Nashville Fairgrounds track. The Nashville Superspeedway would be an altogether new experience. I've never been there before, so I was picturing a flatter track with sweeping corners, said Garvey. I didn't expect it to be so tight and banked. As to the car, Garvey said, quote, "We found some issues to fix with the car. We weren't the fastest team at the test, but we found some things to change before we go back for the race, so the test was successful from that standpoint." Auer was excited to get back to racing. There is already a lot of adrenaline surrounding this team, he said. I don't need to return another opening kickoff for a touchdown to get this team excited. We have a lot of confidence in Mike and the cars we have. We expect a solid start for our new team in Nashville. In their absence, Competitive Edge's car was repainted with logos for negotiationseminar.com, the website for Auer's ICN seminars. Interestingly, this wasn't the first time Auer had sponsored a race car, as he once backed a car for the 24 Hours of Daytona. Now he dedicated ICN's entire marketing budget to the race team, at least until a new sponsor could be found. The team's website, cemotorsports.net, was almost singularly focused on enticing sponsors. Included were the following quotes. Competitive Edge Motorsports' mission is to establish itself as a leading contender in NASCAR racing. To that end, we have acquired state-of-the-art equipment that incorporates leading-edge technology and is supported by an experienced team of professionals committed to excellence. Owners Joe Auer and Barry Haefele and driver Mike Garvey are dedicated to winning. As a team, Competitive Edge Motorsports is committed to financial success for its marketing partners and for itself. Welcome to the potential of NASCAR marketing, one of today's most powerful marketing tools. NASCAR fever is rampant from coast to coast and around the world. We want to share with you the excitement of the sport and explore the possibility of your joining our select group of sponsorship partners. To help in their search for sponsorship, Auer enlisted the aid of Fins TV, a weekly half-hour show produced by Miami's NBC affiliate, which tracked the off-field lives of former Dolphins players. Shadowing the team at the track would be the show's reporter, Lindsay Czarniak, who would go on to have her own career in NASCAR with both Speed Channel and ESPN. In exchange, the car would carry a Fins TV logo on the rear deck lid, encouraging fans to watch the show when it aired on the Sunshine Network. Just like in their debut, the entry list at Nashville was stacked. 54 drivers were entered to contest the grid. Once again, Garvey was not among the 11 DNQs.
A new car to Busch Racing, Mike Garvey, and this number 32, the negotiationsseminar.com. Chevrolet, 19th with a 29.87.
This time he qualified 35th and finished 26th, 9 laps down. With just 2 Busch Series starts under their belt, Competitive Edge became even more ambitious. According to a report by Ruel for the Muskegon Chronicle on April 22nd, they plan to enter some Nextel Cup races, completing an ABC program for Garvey that included his ongoing ride in ASA. Garvey's planned Cup debut would have been at Richmond in May, but after mixed results in testing, it was pushed to Michigan in June. "I'm happy racing ASA," said Garvey, but when the chance came to go to Nextel Cup, who wouldn't want to do that? In the meantime, fresh off his first ASA win of the season at Lanier, Garvey entered the Busch race at Richmond. For this time, 47 cars filled the garage.
And you intently watch every car that goes out, and you look at the sun, you look at the clouds, and you try to analyze and say, did he beat me? Did that look good to you? What's the stopwatch say? You are constantly trying to figure out whether the next guy coming up in line, if he's going to take it away from you.
And even as a crew chief, this qualifying session, I'm sure, to Kyle Busch and Lance McGrew, seems like it's lasting about 2 or 3 hours.
It goes on for days almost when you're waiting for it to end.
Mike Garvey on his first lap, 22.18. That puts him 33rd quickest. Mike will be another one of those cars that's pretty much go or go home here in the 32 car. He picks it up to 29th quickest, 21.71. If he can beat another car or two, he'll be in the show tomorrow night.
For a third time in as many attempts, Garvey got the car in the show, placing 34th. But this time, handling woes handed the team its first DNF, leaving him 37th. As of May 24th, Mike Garvey was still slated to make his Cup debut at Michigan in June. Since the number 32 was already taken by PPI Motorsports, it would instead run the number 51. But just 2 days later, those plans changed completely. Competitive Edge would instead enter the Coca-Cola 600, and not with Garvey, nor with crew chief Shane Tesh. Climbing aboard was former Morgan McClure Motorsports driver Kevin Lepage, with former Base Motorsports crew chief Buddy Sisko, who brought his pit crew. It's also possible the team got its first Cup car from Base, which had shut down its Cup operation early that year, as the team seemed to be running Base's plain white Chevrolets from 2003. I'll be talking more about that Bill Baumgartner team and that season in a future video. By June 11th, Mike Garvey reported he was back to focusing on the ASA Championship, where entering the race in Berlin, he was running second in points, 38 markers behind rookie Wade Day. From his interview, it appeared Garvey disagreed with Competitive Edge over their decision to start and park. "The team that I'm going to race with wants to run a couple laps and then park it," said Garvey, "but I'm not sure if I want to do that. When I race, I want to race. That's all I want to say about it right now." It's been difficult to figure out what happened behind the scenes, but there are a few clues. The most intriguing involve Barry Haefele, the co-owner of both Competitive Edge Motorsports and Race Car Engineering. At least one report from 2004 indicated Auer recently sold Race Car Engineering. It's unclear whether Race Car was sold to Haefele or to a third party. If Haefele earned any money from the sale, he apparently used it to start a Nextel Cup team of his own. Beginning with the August 7, 2004 capture of Competitive Edge's website, Haefele was no longer listed as co-owner of the team, and Auer was listed as sole owner. That same month, Haefele resurfaced on the roster of a brand new Nextel Cup team, 04 Motorsports, with his father Randall Haefele as team owner. 04 hired Mike Garvey and brought his same Janiking sponsorship to their number 75, which fielded at least one Dodge acquired from Bill Davis Racing. Haefele took a hands-on approach with the team, working on the car while delegating crew chief duties to Garvey's friend Jonathan Buckner. But beginning with the August race at Michigan, the same track where Garvey was slated to debut in June, 04 was entered in 8 Cup races in 2004. They withdrew from 3 and failed to make the other 5, then looked ahead to 2005. We'll pick up on Garvey in 04 in a little bit. In the meantime, here's another story pointing to why Lepage was hired by Competitive Edge and what it had to do with Haefele leaving. During my interview with Lepage, he said that Auer's team set up shop in his Matrix Motorsports building and used his hauler, just as R&J Racing would also do later that year. It's likely the team either moved out of Race Car Engineering's shop or was kicked out. And just like with R&J, Lepage's hiring as driver was done in exchange. Whatever the circumstances, it was Lepage and not Garvey who first steered Competitive Edge's Cup car onto the track. Struggling with their developing engine program, Lepage ranked just 44th of the 52 entries in practice. And again, without any attempts, it was up to him to get the car in the show on speed.
The car we won with in 2002. But, things need to go our way, and we need to make sure that we do all the right adjustments. Those ladder adjustments right at the end of the race are the ones that make the difference. And we hit it right in 2002. We'll try to do it again this year.
Be a lot of blue shirts in that grandstand cheering for you on Sunday. Good luck.
How about this? Kevin Lepage, Shelburne, Vermont, who had to time his way into the field. He's in the negotiationsseminar.com Chevrolet. That's a mouthful. He has negotiated himself up to 19th.
He beat a lot of good race cars. He beat Kevin Harvick and a lot of good race cars, but that's behind him.
Larry, he practiced 44th at a 30.21. He qualifies at a 29.33. Where does that come from?
But Kevin Lepage has always qualified good at this racetrack, no matter what car he's been in.
Even without the benefit, or perhaps detriment, of skipping the Nextel Open, and despite the turmoil of their move to Lepage's shop, Lepage gained nearly a second from practice with a 29.33. This was good enough to not only start the race, but do so from 22nd on the grid. The car was set up perfectly for the night qualifying. What a great way to start with a brand new team, said Lepage. Each day we spend together as a team, the better we will be, said Cisco. Among the teams sent home was WW Motorsports with driver Stanton Barrett, so Barrett's sponsor Husqvarna put its logo on Lepage's hood. But Lepage would also have the shortest night. 1 year before his 12th place run in R&J's underdog car, Lepage turned just 56 laps before overheating issues ended his night. I asked Lepage about his experience driving for Auer.
NASCAR was on the rise, and I think he had just enough money to get himself in trouble by getting into the sport. I don't know if Buddy or people around him thought that, or told him that this thing could be a huge money-making deal, and we're going to attract all these sponsors, Joe Gibbs or whatever. I don't know what was said to Joe. I think he was thinking that he could attract more sponsors or do more business-to-business deals, having a race car, by seeing their name, his company's name out on the track, that he could attract more business. And, unfortunately, when you're doing a starting park, people see you for, from qualifying to practice to starting park, they probably see a total of 10 minutes on the racetrack, and obviously that's not enough for the sponsor's name to resonate with these fans.
While reports at the time said Competitive Edge would continue to compete part-time in both Nextel Cup and the Busch Series for the rest of 2004, the team would never again compete in Busch, focusing on Cup exclusively for the rest of its existence. "We are going to keep this great karma going," said Auer after the 600. "We have a very powerful team, and most of the main puzzle pieces are set for a winning effort." They entered Lepage in the next race at Dover, where the car lacked any sponsorship on the hood. His first lap was good enough to secure 38th on the grid, but just as Garvey feared, the team continued to start and park. Lepage turned just 38 laps on Sunday before falling out with transmission issues. It was the same story the next week at Pocono, where Lepage this time started 36th and earned the team's second last-place finish, citing overheating issues after only 9 laps. While Competitive Edge had yet to finish any of their Nextel Cup starts, they'd yet to miss a race either, which attracted the attention of sponsors. Auer was particularly selective in choosing one, hoping for a full-time deal. He finally approved one for the next week at Michigan, site of what would have been Mike Garvey's Cup Series debut.
Breaking news down on pit road, Kevin Lepage in the 51 car just signed Marathon Oil Company for this race and negotiating for next week, and hopefully they'll be able to keep that on this car for the remainder of the season if everything goes well.
Prior to this moment, the closest Marathon Petroleum Corporation had come to sponsoring a NASCAR team was this promotional diecast from 1998. Their absence may well have been due to their indirect role in one of the darkest moments in the history of motorsports. In 1964, it was Marathon who paid $10,000 to become the associate sponsor of Eddie Sachs, and it was Marathon's fuel that filled to capacity the tanks on his American Red Ball Special for the Indianapolis 500. 4 decades later, Marathon returned to racing, not because of a corporate decision, but at the suggestion of one of their employees. Tom Thomas was a 30-year employee of Marathon from Macomb, Ohio, and a hardcore race fan. During that summer of 2004, Thomas began performing PR for Competitive Edge, writing a series of articles with a focus on brand exposure, much as Dave Lawrence had done for Kirk Shelmerdine's team. Still, the sponsorship deal was an unusual arrangement.
Yeah, they were looking to really expand throughout the United States, and I'm not sure if Buddy brought that deal to the table. Somebody brought a deal in, and what happened was it was kind of like a small vendor deal, and it never went up the ladder like it was supposed to do. This guy thought that he could get them to write a big check, and I think we all did, because I like I said, I think it was one of the marketing firms or whatever thought they could get these guys to come in, and it just Marathon wasn't happy that they were doing it, because once they saw it on the car, Gibbs and Childress and Roush, and I mean every Tom, Dick, and Harry who had a team out there was calling them wanting a sponsor, and NASCAR even called them, and it's like if you want to sponsor race cars, you got to sponsor races, and they just got overwhelmed for time, and I think that's why that backfired.
With an engine from his previous ride at Morgan McClure, Lepage went out 22nd in qualifying, where 2 drivers would be sent home. A year earlier, driving Ted Campbell's CLR Ford, Lepage qualified an impressive 4th, the only time that team ever started better than 21st.
The car was really good. Hats off to Chris Andrews, everybody at RCR Engines, and the whole crew for getting our car and attitude in the position it needed.
Neat strategy. Good job.
Tell you, that's going to be interesting come Sunday, the strategy. It's supposed to be pretty warm on Sunday. Darryl, you were talking earlier about the left side tires being quite a bit softer. This is one of those places where we've seen a lot of 2-tire stops, fuel only. I don't know if that'll be the case come Sunday.
Yeah, we'll get back to that, but Kevin just took my breath away when he wobbled off into turn 3 there. You're right, Larry. I can't imagine the guy would take 2 tires.
Kevin Lepage, the negotiation seminar, Marathon Oil, number 51, a Chevrolet for Lepage. First lap 38.53. This lap could and should be better.
And he's one of those cars has to get in the top 38. He has no provisional. We talked earlier, you have to beat 7 cars. Right now he's beat 5 cars with that lap. He needs to beat 2 more. I think this lap's even going to be slower though.
Yeah, I think so too. He didn't come off turn 2. He didn't even go all the way out to the wall as if he wasn't carrying a lot of speed. Same thing off of 4, so I don't think this is a very good lap.
You heard Jeff Hammond talking about this car a while ago. Interesting story on his owner, Joe Auer. He's an ex-Miami Dolphin football player from back in the 60s.
The car was loose, but Lepage still made the show for a 4th straight race. It was another early exit, however, this time after 71 laps, leaving him 41st with overheating, again the listed cause. But after skipping the next 2 races at Sears Point and Daytona, Marathon stepped up its backing for Chicagoland.
Kevin Lepage in the Marathon Oil number 51, 29:41, quickest of 2 so far.
And I'm going to tell you what, that's a good lap for Kevin Lepage. I mean, if he would have ran that lap in practice early, which we anticipate a lot of the cars will pick up, I mean, he would have been 8th quickest, so that's a good run for Kevin.
Lepage qualified 27th, his best since the team's 22nd place debut in Charlotte. And though he turned just 34 laps in the Tropicana 400, leaving him 42nd with a busted fuel pump, he stayed out during caution flag pit stops on lap 21, the first and only lap the team would ever lead. Up to this point, Competitive Edge Motorsports had showed surprising speed for how little fans saw them on Sundays. Since their first start with the former Nemco car at Phoenix in 2003, they made all 3 of their Busch Series attempts and all 5 in Cup. The team hoped to extend that streak into New Hampshire, Lepage's home track, but it wasn't meant to be. His was the slowest of the first 17 drivers and was edged by Hermie Sadler for the final spot in the field. Qualifying for the next race at Pocono was also a struggle. 2 days after his second straight DNQ, Jayski reported Lepage would drive for Competitive Edge for the rest of the season. With any hope, the team would run a fast enough lap to make the Brickyard 400.
Or said motivational information.
I didn't really know you had a job. I just thought you were out here sunbathing and soaking up all the rays and hanging out with the people. I see Dave Burns, he's out there and
he's in the food court.
Yeah, there wasn't anybody there. What was he doing where there was no people? He should be out here on pit road where all the people are. He's over there in the food court looking at pictures of Wally with gray hair.
That's
free pictures. Yeah. Free pictures at that.
Those were real race cars, huh?
That Wally drove?
Big Wally drove.
Oh, Big Wally. I was going to say, when was the last time Wally drove?
Well, we had a go-kart race last year at Talladega.
Did he win?
No. Who won? It was more like, let's see who can wreck whom.
Oh, well.
Was he been in any of those?
Hey, heck, I'm in a few every week. I don't have to go to the go-kart track to see who I can wreck, or get wrecked. So, it just depends on where you are. But
wasn't enough, and after skipping Watkins Glen, Michigan saw Lepage as the fastest car sent home for a 4th straight race. After that, Competitive Edge moved out of Lepage's shop, and R&J Racing moved in. Taking Lepage's place for the next race at Bristol was Tony Raines, the 1996 ASA champion and a winner in the Craftsman Truck Series for Kurt Rohrig. Raines had been driving for Base Motorsports in the Busch Series since 1999, when he earned Rookie of the Year and was part of their short-lived Cup program in 2002 and 2003. That team shut down in early 2004, when Base called upon Raines to return to Busch in place of a struggling Damon Lusk. Raines made his return in the spring race at Bristol, where he finished an impressive 6th. Now, after 2 Cup starts earlier in 2004, a 40th place finish in Dover for Phoenix Racing, then a 30th in the Brickyard 400 in the Bill Davis Racing number 23, Raines was reunited with Buddy Sisko, his crew chief the previous season. Joining Marathon as sponsor was Chase Manhattan Bank, which purchased space on the quarter panels.
And then definitely probably have it on for California next year. I'm not ready for it here at Bristol without a lot of practice, so we're going to put it on. They're putting a radio in it right now. Just got here this morning, so something new for me.
A lot of people have been pushing you to go to a full-face helmet for a long time, haven't they?
Yeah, just hard-headed. Just being so used to what I've done, and there's no other excuse for it. And I need to do it. There's no doubt about it. With the fire in the cars and all that stuff, we need to look at the best way to be safe, and we're going to put one on.
He assured Ryan that he would have it at Fontana. It was pretty funny, though, watching Ryan walk up, peek inside, and you didn't see it hanging on the hook.
So you were oohing about Tony Raines?
Yeah. Yes, I was. Same deal, turn 3. Yahoo! Well, 20th best, so he's in.
Raines joined Lepage in the field, qualifying 33rd for the Sharpie 500. It was for this race that Tom Thomas wrote his first race review for the team's website. The crew wore marathon apparel to match the banners on the pit box and pit stall. In practice, Raines was in the top 20 for much of the session, then ranked in the top 10 during happy hour. The track got slick in qualifying, so after 3 drivers ahead of them wrecked, including Michael Waltrip, Raines took it conservatively and earned 33rd on the grid. In the race itself, Rains ran the 8th fastest lap of the entire race. They considered staying out under the second caution flag to get Marathon more exposure, but the car was so fast they decided to come in. The crew had a great second pit stop for a track bar adjustment and a spring rubber out of the left rear, and Rains felt he had a car to challenge for a top 15. On lap 88, they were 26th when Kyle Petty either blew a tire or the engine, triggering a wreck that collected Schrader, Gahn, and Rains.
Trouble front stretch. Brendan Gahn, Tony Rains,
Kyle Petty,
and Kyle Petty.
The crew tried to fix Rains' car, but the wreck broke the oil cooler, an oil line, the radiator, and the front suspension. Competitive Edge skipped the next race at Fontana, then missed the field for the Chase Cutoff race at Richmond, where Great Value Food Stores joined as sponsor. The team was absent again for the Chase opener at New Hampshire, where the team's DNQ streak began in July. But they returned to action in Dover, looking to recapture their qualifying prowess. Carrying the Buddy Lee logo for new team sponsor Lee Jeans, Rains piloted a former Base Motorsports chassis, and with 49 other drivers entered, including Mike Garvey in the first timed lap for 04 Motorsports, Rains qualified for the race, taking 37th on the grid. Then, for the first time in the team's brief history, they finished the Cup race under power. One day after making his final Busch start for Base, Rains finished 28th, 9 laps down to race winner Ryan Newman. The run did not go unnoticed by Dave Lawrence, who dubbed Rains his Underdog of the Week at RacingUnderdog.com. Although the car was never quite competitive, Rains avoided trouble all day long. Despite being 9 laps down, Tony was running at the finish, a feat that 13 of his competitors could not achieve Sunday. Rains came home in 28th place, his best Cup finish of 2004. Equally as important, the finish pushed the Auer crew into 46th spot in the owner point standings, just one position short of where they need to be to earn provisionals to start the 2005 season. Competitive Edge remained a part-time effort, skipping the races at Talladega and Kansas before returning to action in Charlotte. By now, Rains debuted a new patriotic paint scheme, where Marathon sponsored the car entirely. "We appreciate Marathon sponsor support," said Joe Auer on October 13th. As to the team's status, with new crew chief Mark Tudor, Auer said, quote, "We've been working hard on our engine, and Rains has been driving great. We are really looking forward to this weekend's race."
Right now, that first lap is 26 quickest at a 29.67. But he's beat the likes of Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett. A lot of good race cars back there with him.
Well, Michael, you say that interestingly enough. You hear a lot of his name being mentioned around the garage area a lot here lately for potential openings in some rides.
And that would be well deserved. Former ASA champ. He's had success in the NASCAR Busch Series.
And boys, he picks it up, and he will race because he has definitely beat 14 cars with that lap. 18th quickest.
The car was as fast as it looked, ranking 21st in practice, then securing 28th on the starting grid. But in an incident similar to the Nextel Open that past May, Scott Riggs missed a shift on the start.
Already, the 10 car, Scott Riggs, we got another car. They're wrecking.
Greg Biffle's in the wall. That's Kurt Busch, the championship leader, the blue and yellow car on the bottom of the racetrack. How much damage?
I don't think he got much damage out of that.
We're in it. Right front got damaged pretty bad. He said the right front was damaged pretty bad. We see where the fender is bent a little bit.
That's not too bad. I think he's going to get in there and they can pop that right out.
Rains was one of 7 drivers damaged in the stack-up. After 2 laps, Rains was behind the wall with 3 corners of the car damaged, a broken track bar, a bent truck arm, and a hole in the oil tank. The damage forced Competitive Edge to bring out a brand new car for Atlanta after they skipped the previous round in Martinsville. Universal Chevrolet joined as sponsor, putting their logo on the hood of the Marathon machine. In the same 58-car entry list that ultimately led to the institution of the Top 35 rule, Rains, the pit crew from Base Motorsports Busch team, and a stout Pro Motors engine improved from 36th in practice to qualify 30th on the grid. And just like Dover, he completed most of the race's distance, only to lose the engine in the final 100 laps. At Phoenix, site of Competitive Edge's debut just 1 year earlier, Rains ran double duty with the Busch race, driving Gene Haas's car in the Saturday race. "Getting all the extra practice will definitely help with the Cup effort this weekend," said Rains. Marathon and the team deserve to be running up in the top 15, where we are capable of doing. We have a good team that's had a couple of tough breaks lately. Our time will come. But while Rains finished 10th in the Busch race, he couldn't get the Cup car into the show, and the team didn't enter the Southern 500 a week later. But the season finale at Homestead loomed large, and Joe Auer was excited about the opportunity to have his car start a Nextel Cup race at his home track. "It is great to be back in the neighborhood I grew up in," he said. "Seeing some old friends and relatives is always nice." As to the team's progress, he said, "We have had our new team struggles this year. It is always tough starting a new business or jumping up a level in sports. The competition is extremely high, and that is what I enjoy about it. Why else do it?" Seeking additional sponsorship, Tom Thomas pointed out in his piece for the website, quote, "The Homestead race is the last in the race for the chase and will probably decide the championship." Answering the call was Consort for Men, owned at the time by the Alberto Culver Company. Consort was, and still is, a series of men's grooming products designed for, quote, "the regular guy, the man's man who is confident, sports-oriented, masculine, and uncomplicated." Thus the company's Save the Regular Guy promotion. The product was specifically intended to be an alternative to, quote, "the growing metrosexual trend." The company had that year acquired the domain SaveTheRegularGuy.com and employed sportscaster Dan Patrick as spokesman. Rains debuted his new paint scheme on the same Cup car he drove for Base in 2003 when he qualified 19th and finished 13th. But the car wasn't nearly as fast this time and ranked a distant 47th in owner points. He failed to qualify. That Saturday, Jimmy Spencer finished 28th in the 389th and final Busch Series race for Base Motorsports. Meanwhile, Mike Garvey closed out the 2004 ASA season with a career-best 5 wins, but still fell 29 points short of the season championship won by Kevin Zawinski. That series folded at season's end after Garvey won the series finale at Atlanta, where he took the lead from Bryan Reffner with just 4 laps to go. After he'd parted ways with Competitive Edge and now teamed up with Barry Haefele, the duo looked ahead to more Nextel Cup races in 2005. "Nobody's looking for 42-year-old drivers," said Garvey, "so we're doing it ourselves, building a team from the ground up." The 04 Motorsports team was now owned by Robert Rinaldi, whose company Rinaldi Air Conditioning had its logo on the rear deck lid of the team's year-old Dodge Intrepid from Bill Davis Racing. The number 75 car made its first attempt at the 2005 season at Atlanta, site of Garvey's ASA win the previous fall, and as one of 50 entrants, managed to capture the 43rd and final spot on the grid. "It's really hard to make these races," said Garvey, "but we've got a pretty good little race car." At last, Garvey had his Cup debut, but though he dodged a grinding multi-car wreck on the opening lap, he dropped out soon after the restart, finishing 41st with just 15 laps on track. Garvey continued to pull through as a fast qualifier, taking 34th on the grid at Martinsville, then 37th at Richmond, but turned just 18 and 23 laps in those races, each time citing brake trouble. During the Martinsville race, Garvey and team were featured in an article for the Atlanta Constitution. With 47 drivers entered for the race, the team didn't have a spot in the track's covered garage, and Barry Haefele was working under the car on the bare asphalt. "Everybody says Barry is stupid to do this," said a crewmate, "but he's a racer, and he can say he's got a car in a Cup race." It was an equally unglamorous experience for the Competitive Edge team, as they too embarked on the 2005 campaign. According to another article by the Charlotte Observer, the team stayed at hotels 50 miles from the track and didn't have a corporate jet. "I think it's probably next to impossible to break into Nextel Cup racing with a small budget, even though I'm trying to do it," said Auer. "I wouldn't want to do it as much as I do if it were easy." Marathon had returned to sponsor the number 51, but Auer's consulting firm still handled the team's back office operations. Taking the wheel for 2005 was a relative newcomer in Stuart Kirby, whose Cup Series debut will be a part of an upcoming episode of 500 Days. One of the most interesting things about Kirby is his first job. His father, Kevin, operated J.C. Kirby and Son Funeral Home in Bowling Green, Kentucky, where Stewart greeted families and set headstones. But when the younger Kirby wanted to follow older brother Justin into racing, he proved a quick study. In go-karts, he graduated from local to state, then international competition, becoming number 1 in the world in 1997. That year, Kirby lost a race at Daytona Municipal Stadium due to a flat tire, and and vowed not to return to Daytona until he was in a stock car. He'd only have to wait 3 years, as he proved so impressive running late models at the Nashville Fairgrounds that he returned to Daytona to test an ARCA car on the Big Oval in 2000. The next year, as we saw in episode 2 of 500 Days, Kirby qualified 4th and finished a strong 5th in the ARCA 200, much to the enthusiasm of the new booth for Fox Sports. But after a Cup debut that fall, sponsorship issues kept him from making more than 2 other starts, though he was still just 24 years old in 2005. When Competitive Edge found him, he was back working at the funeral home. On June 17, 2005, Competitive Edge secured a multi-year marketing program with Marathon Ashland Petroleum, and the number 51 would now promote the company's Multi-Power 3 HD motor oil. The deal called for a 12-race sponsorship, with plans for a full-time campaign in 2006. A number of people have been working on the deal for quite some time, and it's finally finished, said Joe Auer. This partnership with a major company like Marathon will bring our race team to a new level. We are very grateful that Marathon has agreed to become our primary sponsor. They are truly a great organization to work with. We want to build this relationship with Marathon and build our race team one step at a time. Auer was just as excited about hiring Kirby, who he'd teamed with crew chief Bob Schacht, the same ARCA driver who qualified for the 1992 Daytona 500 with Sadler Brothers Racing. Schacht had also fielded all 15 of Kirby's ARCA entries up to that point. Stewart is the type of guy we can build a long-term marketing plan around, said Auer. Competitive Edge made its season debut on June 19, 2005 for the Batman Begins 400 at Michigan. As reported by Tom Thomas, Kirby broke a piston after just 6 laps in opening practice, keeping him in the garage for the second session. The team brought out their backup engine that was tuned more conservatively, and with it squeaked into the field, securing 41st on the grid ahead of 4 DNQs. I am excited for all the guys to finally get out here, and especially for Marathon giving us this great opportunity, said Kirby, nervous about his first Cup start in nearly 2 years. He made it through the first fuel run, but picked up a vibration on lap 51, then a loose condition on lap 90. Kirby bounced off the wall, then pulled into the garage under green. It's good to get the first one behind us, he said. It certainly isn't easy out there. 3 races later, Kirby returned to Chicagoland, this time qualified 32nd, where 5 teams were sent home, including 04 Motorsports. This time, the car ran much better on Sunday, though Kirby was caught speeding on pit road. He finished the race under power in 31st, 8 laps down to race winner Dale Earnhardt Jr. Kirby summed up his day. I take the blame for getting the car a little tight after last practice, which cost us a drop early in the race. But after a couple of stops, the Marathon Chevy was awesome. It gave me the support I needed. After that, it seemed like I could pass almost anyone in my area. We took some great steps this weekend, said Joe Auer. Bob, Walter, Peter, and all the guys certainly did a good job. Anytime you don't test but still come out of the box fast, you know you're doing something right. Now 2 for 2 on his qualifying attempts, Kirby prepared for the biggest challenge of his career, qualifying for his first Brickyard 400, where his was one of 52 entries. I think it will take a 49.50 or better to make the race this weekend, Kirby said. Because of the new rules and the quantity and quality of entrants, however, it will be one of the toughest qualifying runs of the year. After a 2-day test in July, Kirby made a sponsor appearance for Marathon at a golf outing near the company's Ohio headquarters. The team also revealed a new paint scheme, which for the first time would promote Marathon's American Spirit motor oil. The car looked fast sitting still, but in qualifying it was well off the pace. Only after that lap, when team engineer Walter Giles looked over the car, did he realize the front brakes had been engaged during the entire lap. The car wouldn't get up and go like it always does, he said, so I knew something was bad wrong. After my qualifying run, when I got off the gas pulling into the pits, the car stopped almost immediately without me pressing the brakes. I had trouble even driving it to the garage. It's been probably 16 years since I've seen something like that happen, said Giles. Our front brake's master cylinder release valve didn't operate correctly. Apparently, when Stewart got off the brake pedal for the first time, the front brakes just stayed on. There is evidence that leaves no doubt that's what happened. We had scarred and warped front rotors, which turned blue. Even the calipers themselves expanded so much from the heat they scored the inside of the front wheels. It was a bitter disappointment for Kirby, who still wasn't the slowest qualifier despite the issue. Had this not happened, he could well have been quick enough to make the field. Still, Joe Auer kept a positive outlook as the team prepared for its next attempt in the August return to Michigan. "We know for a fact we have a good team and fast cars," he said. "We tested well, and on the chassis dyno, the Indy car produced more horsepower than we ever had. We spent a day at the Ride Height Simulator, which produced great results. We worked on that car for 3 weeks, and everything was set for a top 25 qualifying effort, no doubt. We'll take these efforts and make them pay off in 2 weeks. You'll see the marathon team be successful at Michigan if the unusual problem gremlins cut us a little slack." During the Michigan weekend, Kirby crossed paths with Jeff Gordon, who was pleased to see him. "What have you been doing?" Gordon asked. "Why haven't you been racing?" Kirby said, "I told him that I had just been working at the funeral home, and he was like, 'You don't race anything? It sure doesn't show on the racetrack.' Stuff like that really makes me feel good." Kirby indeed turned heads that weekend, qualifying a strong 21st for the GFS Marketplace 400. Once again, he nearly made it the entire distance, only to draw the final caution that set up the 51-lap run to the finish.
There's Kirby on the left rear down, but that could have been
2 cars hit the wall.
Kirby finished 41st and would take last place due to brake issues in his next attempt at Fontana. He remained an excellent qualifier, locking competitive edge into their next 5 straight races after the disaster at Indianapolis. In between, Kirby continued to fulfill his sponsor's obligations. In August, he participated in an event with reality show contestants Rob and Amber of Survivor and The Amazing Race. In September, he visited Marathon's St. Paul, Minnesota refinery, then NASCAR Day at the company's headquarters in Findlay, and in November took in Race Team Day at the Marathon Oil Houston Tower. But by then, the team's qualifying streak had ended, and he missed the show at both Atlanta and Texas. Soon after, Kirby and Auer mutually agreed to part ways. "We know that Stewart is popular with marathon employees and racing fans, which made this a tough decision for both parties," said Auer, "but it needed to be made now to improve the next level of performance. NASCAR Nextel Cup racing demands that the team continually improve. Kirby would never make another start in NASCAR." Kirby's replacement was Bryan Reffner, who also DNQ'd at Phoenix before he too was released. All that was left was Homestead, where Joe Auer desperately wanted his car in the show. To do this, he went back to the driver, who started their team in the first place. After Mike Garvey got 04 Motorsports into the spring Richmond race, the 75 team would qualify for just one more Nextel Cup event in 2005, taking last place with Wayne Anderson at Loudon. By then, Garvey had made another 6 Cup starts with Jeff Steck, and for the first time was able to run full Cup races, with a best finish of 25th in his team debut at Pocono. But when R&J Racing moved out of Kevin Lepage's shop, the Vermont driver took over the Steck ride, and would again for 2006. Garvey attempted to make 4 of the last 6 races of the 05 season with R&J and the 04 team, but didn't make any of them. This led to his reunion with Joe Auer and Competitive Edge Motorsports. "I am excited to get back with Competitive Edge in the Auers," said Garvey. "It is a pleasure to work with such a professional group." Joe Auer added, quote, "It's great to get Mike back in the car with team engineer Walter Giles."
Garvey, one of the go-or-go-home cars, finishing his Bud Pole qualifying run. He's in decent shape. Not great, but decent.
He's beaten 3 cars so far. He's only got to beat 2 more, and he'll be in the show on tomorrow, on Sunday. Matt?
Garvey didn't beat the 2 cars he needed, and Auer was again shut out of his home race. Perhaps in 2006, things would be different. Very few of the field fillers discussed in this series had an official diecast release in 2004. Among the teams discussed in the series so far, one of the exceptions was Phoenix Racing. The 2004 version of the Mikasuki Dodge, the same one Joe Ruttman start and parked early that year, was made in both 1/24th and 1/64th scale. But when the sponsorship deal ended, many of these cars were simply thrown away. Only a few were rescued by an employee to be sold on eBay, including this one. Competitive Edge's car was also produced, and under equally fortunate circumstances. In late 2005, a fan named Sean contacted the team, asking if a diecast of their car would be made. He was told there wouldn't, to which he asked them to reconsider, saying the Marathon machine was one of the best-looking cars on the track. 3 months later, he was presented with merchandise of the number 51, including a 1/24th scale diecast by Racing Champions, some of the last NASCAR items the company ever produced. In fact, two versions would be released, both the car from late 2004 and the version with yellow numbers from 2005. Marathon had jumped in with both feet. By March of 2006, they sent their franchisees a merchandise starter kit with not only diecast, but stickers, hats, shirts, keychains, and more. The kits were sent for free, allowing each franchise to sell them in their stations and keep the profits. This increased enthusiasm came as Competitive Edge planned to finally run their long-awaited first full season in the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series, but those were also the first plans to change. On January 13, 2006, the team elected to skip the superspeedway races, which they'd yet to attempt in the team's entire existence. They still expected to start the year in the season's second round in Fontana and competed in as many of the 31 races that came after, though by February that number had dropped to 20. "We've improved some things over the winter to increase our performance this year," said Auer. "Our car bodies are better, engines are getting where they need to be, and overall infrastructure is growing. Our goal is to get into all 20 races we enter and really become more competitive this year." At the time, the team had no driver selected. Even the diecast left the roof rails blank, but Mike Garvey was set to test the car in Las Vegas at the end of the month. They arrived with both a 2005 Chevrolet for the first day of testing and a brand new 2006 model for the second. Garvey was now announced as the team's driver for the upcoming season. He wouldn't compete for Rookie of the Year, however, as he'd already run enough races to lose his eligibility. During the test, Garvey earned the 12th fastest time and credited this to both the team's new engine program and additional support from General Motors. There was also additional sponsorship. On January 23rd, Print Media Incorporated signed for the first 4 races of 2006. Company president Jordan Wachtel anticipated a long-term relationship. "There is no better place to supplement your marketing efforts than NASCAR," said Joe Auer. "The quality of work and service Print Media provides gives me the confidence to recommend them to our other business relations throughout the country, and we are glad to have them aboard." Print Media received its first exposure at Fontana in February for the team's season debut. After the car had issues fitting the template in inspection, Garvey went out to qualify. His lap of 39.49 seconds claimed 35th on the grid for the Auto Club 500, where 5 teams were sent home, and Arnold Motorsports had withdrawn their final Cup entry. "We're extremely pleased with how the new engine and car performed," said Auer. "Mike knew we were in a go-or-go-home situation and really laid it out. He improved over half a second in time between practice and qualifying." As to the season ahead, Auer added, quote, "We're expecting good things this year. It's a year of growth, but it is also a year of high expectations for us." On Sunday, long green flag runs prevented Competitive Edge from fixing a handling issue that left them 4 laps down in 38th. But now, after becoming the first driver to race for them in both Busch and Cup, Garvey was excited about the team's future. "With new bodies, equipment, and team members, I really didn't know what might happen, but this day exceeded my expectations," Garvey said. "I was nervous coming into this race, but this was a solid start and a good place to build from. The team came together well and got the first race in the books." 2 races later, the team's next attempt came in Atlanta, site of Garvey's last win at ASA 2 years earlier. It was also a highly anticipated race for Marathon, which 7 years earlier began opening 150 stores in the state and set up their Southern District office in Norcross. Garvey ranked just 32nd in practice, but somehow found 2 miles per hour in qualifying, taking the 43rd fastest time. He should have qualified for the race, but was instead bumped by the slowest car in the field. Not only that, but by another startup team founded by other football stars, which had Tony Raines in its driver lineup. For these first few races of the season, Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach's team Hall of Fame Racing had Terry Labonte in the number 96 DLP Chevrolet, and despite the slow speed, his past champion's provisional put him in the show. It was another bitter disappointment for Competitive Edge, but in his weekend article for the website, Tom Thomas rallied the troops. "Let's look forward to the team's next outing and keep the faith, race fans. Marathon is racing in Nextel Cup, the highest exposure spectator sport in America, and probably the most challenging good old boys club to break into of any there is. This team can go into the next event proud and knowing they have what it takes." Next up was Bristol, which Garvey likened to Winchester, where he'd run countless laps and held the track record until it was repaved. "They are very much alike," Garvey said of the 2 tracks. "Turns 3 and 4 here are just like Bristol, but turns 1 and 2 have somewhat of a flatter entry. but this is a great place to try some different ideas to run good at Bristol. I really don't know which one is faster. They both drive a lot alike and are fun to race at. I really couldn't tell you which one is faster. The 2006 Food City 500 invited 49 drivers for 43 spots, and Auer remarked on the work the team had done. Preparation for this first short track event of the season includes a lot of modifications to the car for the rigors of Bristol. The guys in the shop have been busy dropping in different gearing, springs, oversized brake cooling ducts, and all the other adjustments you need to go 500 laps of hard racing at this one-of-a-kind raceway. We're very pleased with our engine program this year. Feel we'll have the power we need to run well. But it was all for naught. A mix of rain and snow canceled qualifying, sending Garvey home for a second straight race. Not wanting to let their hard work go to waste, the team brought their short track car to Martinsville, where Garvey again found speed, shaving down a 20.163 second lap in practice to a 20.12 in qualifying, good enough for 39th on the grid. On Sunday, Garvey only picked up a dent in the door during the big pileup on lap 2, the same incident which damaged Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s car that famously still finished 4th. Garvey climbed to 30th before the brakes overheated on lap 50, sending him to the garage. He returned to turn another 44 laps, bringing his total to 93 complete, but he exited the track a second time, leaving him 41st at the finish. Again, Tom Thomas looked at the bright side, pointing out how much exposure Marathon received that weekend. While track time in the race was less than we'd all like, nobody more than the team, the brand got excellent coverage in qualifying this week, with a terrific extended TV shot of the car. Then, in happy hour on Saturday, major kudos go to the Competitive Edge Motorsports team for the placement of Marathon tent, the blue tent with the giant Marathon logos on top just inside the Turn 3 wall. Every time the TV cameras followed a group of cars through that turn, the TV audience got a screen full of the Big M times 4. At the next race in Texas, Garvey was borderline on speed in practice, and just like Atlanta, picked up a monster lap in qualifying, gaining 4 miles per hour for a speed of 187.389 miles per hour, good enough for 23rd on the grid as the fastest go-or-go-homer. The car also showed consistent pace in happy hour, which carried over into the race itself. Garvey even saved the car from a wreck after Robbie Gordon tried to put him into the wall. With less than 100 laps to go, he was still on track and had managed to outlast 5 other drivers in the garage area, including Greg Biffle and Ryan Newman. But when Carl Edwards wrecked on lap 257, Garvey was collected, ending his day in 38th. Competitive Edge didn't plan on running the spring race at Phoenix, even though the track hosted their NASCAR debut back in 2003. But the strong run in Texas made them eager to keep up the momentum. They also wanted to practice competing in changing conditions from day to night. Unfortunately, they didn't get the chance. Garvey missed the race by just 84 thousandths of a second. It was their third DNQ in the first 8 races of the season, and the team had yet to finish better than 38th in any of their 3 starts. On April 23rd, the team planned to test at either Memphis or Lakeland in preparation for the upcoming race at Richmond. Our Phoenix weekend was a disappointment for all of us, and we will not let that happen again, said Joe Auer. We are testing this week and staying there until we are happy with our equipment. With Buddy Sisko and a few other specialists joining us at the test, we will diagnose the gremlins and get the Marathon Chevrolet where it deserves to be. The next week, the team also put out a job listing looking for new crew members, including tire specialists, shock specialists, mechanics, and engineers. Competitive Edge Motorsports is looking for team members who want to make a difference. We want professionals who are eager to create excitement both in the garage and on the track. We need those who have the drive for success and want to make an instant impact. Come be part of the excitement of a growing team. One of the team's hires was Butch Hilton, a veteran crew chief who just a year earlier won the Busch Series opener at Daytona with Tony Stewart. Hilton was hired as a consultant to help the team get to the next level. This team has great potential, but is in early stages of development, said Hilton. It takes time and effort from all the parties involved. The number 51 has great ownership and a willing sponsor, but now they have to get all the little pieces of the puzzle together too. In order to really be competitive in NASCAR, teams have to obtain the right personnel in order to test often and race weekly. The science and technology the big teams are using is incredible, and that is what this team needs to work toward. NASCAR is a long-term commitment, and the number 51 just needs to go after it. On May 4th, the team decided to skip Richmond and instead turn their attention to both the Nextel Open and Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte. We decided that showing up at the track not ready to race is worse than not showing up at all, Garvey said. We needed to step back and reorganize a bit. After testing 2 different cars, Garvey ranked 6th fastest of 50 cars in an evening test and 15th best across both sessions. Competitive Edge had never competed in the Nextel Open, and now faced the added challenge of a slick track and a new tire compound.
And I tell you what, he's sitting 13th.
Here we go. Mike Garvey in the Marathon 51's got it in the fence.
Garvey bounced off the wall in qualifying, forcing him to start next to last in a field of 29. He climbed to 18th in the 30-lap race, but slipped to 21st at the finish. We were competitive with the main pack, which is a solid step for this young team, said Garvey. We're no longer trying to just stay on the lead lap, but we're actually racing competitively. But in the Coca-Cola 600, where 16 drivers contested the final 7 spots in the field, Garvey found himself on the wrong side of the cut line. About the only exposure Marathon received that weekend was a faint image of the team's pit equipment from Joe Nemechek's onboard camera. Despite the setback, on June 2nd, Competitive Edge reposted an article about a test of NASCAR's Car of Tomorrow at Charlotte. At the time, Competitive Edge was again planning to attempt its first full-time season in 2007, meaning they'd have to keep up with the rollouts of the new car, on top of making their first starts on the super speedways. But 3 days later, the team elected to skip the upcoming race at Dover, where Tony Raines had run so well in 2004. Among the team's concerns was less exposure, as the Dover race was going to be broadcast on FX instead of Fox. They instead looked ahead to the following race at Pocono, where Joe Auer felt the team could get a better read on the strength of their latest engines and prepare for their 3rd attempt at the Brickyard 400. I have a lot of confidence going into Pocono, said Garvey. I did real well there last year. The Marathon Monte Carlo SS has tripped up lately with luck and speed, but hopefully that is behind us. Thanks to all the Marathon folks for sticking behind us. I can't say enough about their support. It is tough breaking into the league of the big boys, but we can do it. In practice at Pocono, Garvey ran 35th of the 48 entrants, but pulled a bad draw in qualifying. This time he'd have to go out 3rd and in full sunshine. Despite this, Garvey was just fast enough to secure the final spot on the grid. On Sunday, he climbed to 31st with solid lap times and decent pit stops, but the brakes only carried him to lap 69, leaving him 40th. The next week during practice at Michigan, the engine was stumbling and the suspension setup wasn't right. The crew worked feverishly to make repairs and make it to the line in qualifying. The car was still too loose, the engine off-key, but Garvey missed the race by just a couple tenths of a second. After skipping both Sears Point and Daytona, Competitive Edge arrived in Chicagoland. This time, 50 drivers were entered, including 2 past champions in Terry Labonte and Bill Elliott. This was too much, as once again, Garvey missed the show for a 6th time in 10 attempts. 1 year earlier, Competitive Edge Motorsports was denied a place in their first Brickyard 400 when the brakes locked up on Stuart Kirby. Just a few weeks earlier, Joe Auer was interested to see how his team would perform at Pocono to test their newest engine combination, all with eyes on making things right in their next run at Indianapolis. But the team never made it back. On August 1st, 2006, just 5 days before the Brickyard, reports came that Competitive Edge Motorsports was shutting down. The team confirmed this on the 3rd, and on the 16th, Joe Auer's son, Joe Auer IV, posted a farewell message on the website. Titled, CEM Says Thank You, it reads as follows. Thanks for all your support over the years with Competitive Edge Motorsports. Your efforts are very much appreciated, and we wish you all the best of luck in the future. As you know, this sport is very tough, and without you it would be even tougher. As of last week, we closed our doors and moved our sponsorship to the Petty organization, for whom we have great respect. With that said, we are selling our entire inventory at reduced rates. If you know anyone interested in a Nextel Cup starter kit, at least we still have our humor, please direct them to my phone number or email address. I will be at the track helping with the transition of our sponsors and hope to see you there. For a 12-page list of items available for purchase, click here. Joe Auer IV. Competitive Edge Motorsports never quite lived up to its name. For bits and pieces of 4 seasons, their battle was just to qualify and to perhaps learn just enough in the race to help them for the next one. Unlike other teams in this series, they never really had that breakout run, whether on Friday or on Sunday. They never finished on the lead lap, never even attempted a superspeedway race, and even with a big-name sponsor, popular drivers and supportive fans couldn't climb the ladder any higher, even for a moment. Instead, they left the sport as quietly as they arrived. But no team is unimportant. Each can leave a legacy all their own. On August 17, 2006, Joe Auer IV received a call from a businessman named Eddie Kucharski of Denton, Texas. It was Kucharski who bought Competitive Edge's equipment and formed his own team, H&K Motorsports. He planned to enter Trevor Boyce in the upcoming fall race at Charlotte with Travis Carter as consultant and Cicero Scott as crew chief. But Boyce had trouble getting his NASCAR license renewed, so H&K planned to run the Daytona 500 and bought 3 Car of Tomorrow chassis for later that season. But the team never made it to the track. Instead, in 2009, Boyce started his own race team, the Boys Will Be Boys Racing Company, and attempted to make his first Cup start since 1993. His first of 3 unsuccessful attempts came at Phoenix, where a familiar name made the cut. That same 2009 season, Barry Haefele, Joe Auer's former business partner, returned to team ownership with a team of his own, H&S Motorsports. He even reunited with Mike Garvey, who had been out of NASCAR since Competitive Edge closed. Of his time with the team, Garvey remarked that he was tired of racing without enough funds, equipment, testing, or crew members. "We did the best with what we had," he said. Now at age 46, he faced even longer odds. Together, Garvey and Haefele made a spirited bid at qualifying for the 2009 Daytona 500, but the number 73 Dodge wasn't quite fast enough in qualifying or the duels. They then missed the next 2 races at Fontana and Las Vegas, then withdrew from Martinsville. For Phoenix, Haefele replaced Garvey with Tony Raines.
Quality concrete Dodge. Kind of time his way into the show. 14 hours of NASCAR on your TV today, including the Bash's 200, the NASCAR Nationwide Series race that tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time will air over on ESPN2.
Mike, you did Nationwide Series qualifying. I think it's a Carl Edwards, Joey Logano front row, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Tony Raines by no means safe with that lap, 27:49. This should be pretty good news for Scott Speed right now, who's 18th quickest.
It's also good news for Scott Riggs because it means Riggs is probably going to race here tomorrow night.
Yeah, unless.
But right now it looks like he's right on top of that lap that Scott Riggs ran, but it looks like he lost it off turn 4. So yeah, Scott won't be locked in yet, but this will be good news for him.
So Smith and Speed are in.
The lap was just enough to take the 43rd and final starting spot, but the car only turned 56 laps before brake trouble left him in last place. H&S Motorsports made its last attempt that fall at Martinsville, where Josh Wise carried sponsorship from Don Arnold, formerly of Arnold Motorsports. He missed the show. Mike Garvey closed out his NASCAR career in 2010 and 2011 as a start-and-park driver for a Truck Series team that had designs on making the jump to the Xfinity Series. That team, RSS Racing, remains a weekly challenger with lead driver Ryan Sieg. In 2015, Garvey stepped away from racing to get into driver development. He served as both a driver coach and crew chief for his car owner at the time, Tracy Goodson. When news broke that Competitive Edge had closed, it came with another announcement that Marathon Petroleum Company would join Kyle Petty at Petty Enterprises. Marathon is proud to move our sponsorship to the number 45 Petty Enterprises team with driver Kyle Petty, said Mary Ellen Peters, Marathon's Senior Vice President of Marketing. The team is owned by Richard Petty, the man known as the King of NASCAR. We believe this move provides a continued presence for Marathon in all of the remaining races this season. The company was first an associate at Indy, where Petty finished 27th, then became a primary sponsor for an increasing number of races over the next few years, cars that were also produced in diecast. These years turned out to be the last in NASCAR for both sponsor and team. Marathon hasn't sponsored a NASCAR team since November 16, 2008, when Chad McCumbee finished 39th in the season finale at Homestead. Along with teammate Bobby Labonte, who finished 33rd that night, the duo brought Petty Enterprises' final total to 2,817 combined Cup Series starts. Joe Auer III died March 9, 2019, at age 77. His legacy lives on, both in the history of the Miami Dolphins and in both his businesses, which are still in operation today. While ICN's original website, negotiationsseminar.com, is no longer active, ICN now hosts at least 12 different seminars, both in person and online. As for race car engineering, they outgrew their old Winter Park shop and moved to their current location in Lakeland. Leroy Porter, who worked for the company back when Joe Auer and Barry Haefele operated the business, retired just this year. In the next Rise of the Field Fillers, we go from a team that made 23 starts in NASCAR to one that made even fewer, though it did so with one of the sport's most unique personalities.
In America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.